So, imagine walking into a room where every single thought you have ever had is just, well, broadcast on a massive screen.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, every secret motive you have ever kept hidden and every quiet judgment you have ever made about another person, all of it is suddenly up there for the ultimate judge to see.
That is a terrifying thought.
Right. Nothing is left in the shadows. And the primal human instinct, tracing all the way back to the dawn of time, has always been to run and hide from that level of exposure.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Well, welcome to Reformed Thinking. Today we are taking a deep dive into the magnificent solution to that specific terror. We are looking at a text that addresses the human dilemma of absolute moral bankruptcy before an infinitely holy creator.
So the source material we are examining today gives us a really rigorous verse-by-verse analysis of Hebrews chapter 4, specifically verses 15 and 16.
Okay.
We're going to look closely at the historical context of the first century, the original Greek grammar, and the supreme theological comfort found in the heavenly priesthood of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that is going to be fascinating.
It really is. The author of Hebrews addresses this universal human crisis not with, sentimental platitudes, but with objective historical reality.
Right.
This analysis shows that the passage is a tightly ordered theological argument. It is designed to rescue weary believers from spiritual despair by anchoring them in the finished work of the Son of God.
So let's unpack this terrifying lead-up a bit. Because before we can find any comfort in a sympathetic priest, you have to understand the sheer, blinding exposure that necessitates him in the first place.
You really do.
You cannot grasp the rescue if you do not understand the danger. The verses we are focusing on directly follow verses 12 and 13, and those preceding verses are, they're absolute showstoppers.
They are intense.
They describe God's word as a living, active, two-edged sword. It pierces all the way down to the division of soul and spirit, joints and marrow, discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart.
Yeah.
The text says that no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed.
It leaves nothing hidden.
Think about a modern equivalent, Imagine verses 12 and 13 as a brutal forensic financial audit. But for your soul.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
You are sitting across from an auditor who has access to every single ledger. Every deleted email, every hidden account, every single flaw and secret sin is laid open.
Oh, wait, there's no hiding.
The law strips away all our hypocrisy and leaves us with nowhere to hide. And faced with that, human instinct usually runs in two ruinous directions.
Which are?
Well, pride suggests we can approach God through our own moral effort. We try to dress up our exposed state.
Yeah, we try to fix it ourselves.
Exactly. Precisely. And despair suggests we must stay far away because we have failed so miserably. But that creates a massive problem.
It really does.
If God is completely sovereign and holy, and I am completely exposed by this sword, why wouldn't I just be crushed? How does a believer actually survive this total exposure without being consumed?
What is fascinating here is the massive structural pivot that the author of Hebrews executes in verse 14. It answers your question perfectly.
Okay, lay it on me.
He transitions us from that terrifying exposure to the saving provision. The author brings us to the absolute brink of terror under the piercing gaze of the divine word.
Right.
But he does not leave us under the crushing weight of the law. Verse 14 says, "Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession."
That is a huge shift.
It is.
Yeah.
The transition moves from judgment deserved to grace mediated. The exposed sinner is not left to figure out a path to God. God provides the path through a mediator. And this mediator is not just any priest. He is the great high priest who has passed through the heavens.
Yeah.
The law, with its surgical precision, drives the believer out of concealment,
Yeah.
but not so they will run away in fear. It is so they will run toward the throne through Christ.
I love that. So the solution to the piercing sword of God's omniscience is the mediating shield of God's Son.
Yes. The author establishes that the God before whom all hearts lie open is the very same God who has provided the perfect representative to stand in our place.
To really grasp the weight of this text and the urgency of that pivot, we have to step back. We need to look at the specific crisis facing the original audience who received this letter.
We do. Context is everything here.
Put yourself in the first century pressure cooker. This letter was written prior to 70 AD. That means the physical Second Temple in Jerusalem was still standing in all its architectural glory.
Right, it was the center of everything.
If you walked into Jerusalem, you would experience a total sensory overload. You would see the white-robed Aaronic priests offering daily animal sacrifices.
Yeah.
You would smell the burning incense and the roasted meat. You would hear the chanting of the choirs. It was a legally recognized, highly visible, culturally accepted system.
And it felt safe.
Right. Now, the Hebrew Christians receiving this letter had confessed Jesus of Nazareth as the promised Messiah, and because of that invisible reality, they were facing intense persecution.
It was brutal for them.
They were dealing with massive social ostracism, the plundering of their property, and total alienation from their Jewish families.
Yeah.
If you are losing your livelihood, if your family has disowned you, and you are watching your property being confiscated by the state, how tempting is it to return to the old, safe system?
The temptation for these early Christians was entirely unique. They were not tempted to plunge into pagan debauchery.
Right, they weren't going to Roman temples.
No, they were not being tempted to go worship Roman gods or engage in temple prostitution. The temptation was to slide backward into the culturally safe confines of Levitical Judaism.
That makes a lot of sense.
Consider the immense psychological appeal of a visible religion with tangible buildings and sensory rituals, especially when you are losing your home for an invisible, crucified Messiah.
Oh, absolutely.
You can easily imagine the whisper of the enemy saying, just go back to the temple, it is safe there. Your family will welcome you back.
Yeah, just compromise a little.
Right. The Romans will not bother you. It is still the religion of Abraham, is it not? That psychological pressure is precisely why the author of Hebrews writes with such intense polemical fire. Returning to the temple shadows would not be a safe retreat. It would be apostasy into eternal ruin.
Apostasy is a heavy word. Why would going back to the temple system be considered apostasy? I mean, they're still worshiping the God of Israel, right?
Well, the author meticulously contrasts the passing earthly sanctuary with the eternal heavenly sanctuary where Christ rules. That explains why it is apostasy.
Okay, break that down for us.
He argues that the Old Covenant priesthood, the physical temple, and the animal sacrifices were divinely ordained, yes, but they were shadows.
It's a shadow.
Yes, they were types and temporary patterns designed to point forward to the coming substance. Now that the Son of God has appeared, died, risen, and ascended, the epoch of redemptive history has fundamentally shifted.
That is a massive transition.
It is. The earthly priests were themselves sinful, mortal, and constantly dying. They needed replacement constantly.
Right.
They entered an earthly tent with the blood of animals that could never actually cleanse the human conscience. By contrast, Jesus has passed through the heavens into the immediate presence of God. His priesthood is heavenly, effectual, and permanent. To abandon him in order to escape social pressure would be to reject the only priestly access that the earlier system anticipated.
That is so tragic when you put it like that.
It really is. It would be trading the eternal reality for a passing shadow. You would be swapping the sovereign intercessor for a weak human substitute. The author is locking their faith to the finality of the new covenant.
So facing this massive temptation to retreat to the old system, the author of Hebrews points them to the specific nature of their new heavenly priest.
Yes, he does.
This is where I look at verse 15. The text says, "For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses."
That is such a key verse.
It is. And here's where the original language actually changes how we read this. The author uses a Greek double negative construction here. The phrase is, "oh me."
Right.
Now, in English, a double negative is usually a grammatical mistake. If I say, "I do not have no money," it creates a weak positive or just sounds wrong. But in Greek, this double negative construction operates differently, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. In Greek, a double negative creates an undeniable, intense affirmation.
Oh, I see.
The author is declaring that it's ontologically impossible for Christ not to feel our weaknesses.
So
He is completely actively engaged in understanding our frailties.
that is beautiful.
The contrast the author establishes here would have been particularly striking against the backdrop of ancient philosophical thought.
How so?
Well, in Hellenistic philosophy, particularly within Stoicism, the prevailing concept of the divine was defined by apatheia.
Apathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is the idea that God cannot feel emotion, cannot be affected by human sorrow, and absolutely cannot suffer.
Really?
The Stoics believed that if God could be affected by external circumstances or human pain, it would imply dependency and weakness. It would strip him of his sovereignty.
So the pagan idea was that a perfect God has to be a frozen, emotionless statue. If he feels anything, he is weak.
Exactly.
But this text shatters that pagan philosophical framework entirely. This specific Greek phrasing destroys the modern lie we tell ourselves when we are suffering.
It really does.
How often do you sit in the dark, overwhelmed by a trial, and the very first thought in your head is, no one understands my specific pain?
We all do that.
We convince ourselves that our circumstances are so unique, our weariness so isolating, that even heaven looks down with this sort of blank confusion. But the text shatters that isolation.
The Greek word used here for sympathize is sympathasi. It literally means to suffer with.
With suffer with.
Yes. The author deliberately bypassed other available words like elik. That word means to have a sort of distant pity or to show mercy from a safe, detached vantage point.
Oh, wow.
By choosing sympathati, the text insists that Christ's compassion is experiential. He does not look down on human suffering as an abstract concept. He knows it from the inside out.
That changes everything.
His exaltation to the right hand of the Father has not made him remote or cold. The sovereign mediator actively co-suffers with his people.
Yeah.
And this active sympathy is directed toward our weaknesses. That is a broad term encompassing the frailty, vulnerability, and immense pressures of mortal life.
We see that experiential compassion all over the historical accounts of his life. He voluntarily took on real physical and emotional limitations.
He really did.
He experienced brutal hunger fasting in the wilderness. He experienced total physical weariness, sitting by the well in Samaria, asking for a drink of water.
Yeah, he was physically exhausted.
He experienced crushing sorrow, weeping at the tomb of Lazarus. He knew the sting of betrayal from a close friend, and the absolute weight of abandonment when his disciples fled in the Garden of Gethsemane.
It was total isolation.
He knows the pressure of temptation, the ache of loneliness, and the reality of physical pain. He did not hover above the human experience in a protective bubble. He stepped fully into the dirt and the tears of it.
Amen to that.
But that brings us to a massive question. If Christ fully entered human suffering and weakness, where is the boundary of his identification with us?
That is the critical question.
Verse 15 continues by saying that he was tempted according to our likeness, or in every respect as we are, yet completely without sin. The Greek phrase there is churis hamartias, without sin.
Right.
This is the absolute boundary. He was tempted in all things, yet he remains spotless.
That boundary is crucial. Theologians describe Christ's condition using the Latin phrase non posse peccar.
Okay, that sounds like a mouthful.
It does sound incredibly intimidating, non posse peccar, but the idea behind it is actually beautiful.
Tell me more.
It essentially means it was not just that he did not sin, it is that he was fundamentally, utterly incapable of sinning.
Incapable of sinning.
Yes. Because he's the incarnate Son of God, his temptations did not stem from internal, corrupted desires.
Okay.
When we are tempted, our own fallen nature often cooperates with the temptation. There is an internal traitor that wants to yield.
Yeah, that is so true.
Christ had no internal corruption. His temptations were entirely external assaults from Satan and a fallen world battering against his holy humanity.
Okay, but wait. I have to push back on this because this is where people get tripped up.
Sure, go ahead.
If Christ never actually sinned, if he was fundamentally incapable of sinning, doesn't that make him completely unrelatable?
I hear that a lot.
How can he sympathize with my failure if he has never failed? It feels like getting marriage advice from someone who has never been married, or getting financial advice from someone who was born a billionaire and never had to pay a light bill.
Right.
We tend to think we need counsel from someone who has messed up, just like we have.
That is a very common objection, but it actually misunderstands the nature of temptation.
How so?
Think of it this way. A sinful priest needs his own redemption. A sinless priest actually accomplishes redemption.
Oh, that is a stark contrast.
Because he never yielded, he actually knows the full force of temptation far better than any of us do.
Wait, really?
Yes. When we are tempted, we eventually give in, which means we only feel the pressure up to our specific breaking point.
Yeah.
Once you yield, the pressure stops.
Oh, I see what you were saying.
Christ never yielded. Therefore, he felt the pressure build to its absolute maximum extremity and withstood it perfectly. His obedience was not effortless play acting. It was a grueling, agonizing perseverance through testing.
I love that. Let's use an analogy here. Think about a structural engineer stress testing a massive steel bridge.
Okay.
The engineer does not apply millions of pounds of pressure to destroy the bridge. They apply that pressure to prove its absolute capacity.
Right.
You and I are like a flimsy wooden footbridge. We snap when you put 500 pounds of pressure on us. The moment we snap, we stop feeling the pressure.
Yeah, the tension is gone.
But Christ is the steel bridge. He took the maximum catastrophic load of temptation, millions of pounds of pressure without snapping. He knows the weight of the pressure infinitely better than the bridge that broke early.
That is an excellent way to visualize it. And his absolute purity is what allows him to save us.
Yeah.
This brings us to the dual categories of Christ's obedience. His passive obedience and his active obedience.
Unpack those for us.
His passive obedience refers to his willing submission to the wrath of God on the cross, paying the penalty for our law-breaking. But his active obedience refers to his perfect submission to the law of God under massive pressure throughout his entire life. Both are necessary for our salvation.
Let's translate that active and passive obedience into a relatable mechanism. How does his perfect record actually help me?
It is a great question.
Compare it to a financial transaction. Imagine you are buried under $1 billion of crippling debt. You are facing prison.
A nightmare scenario.
Christ's passive obedience is like a wealthy benefactor stepping in and paying off your entire $1 billion debt. You no longer owe a dime.
Right, the debt is cleared.
But here is the catch. Your bank account is still at zero. You are not in debt, but you are still completely broke.
Yes.
Christ's active obedience is that same benefactor depositing his own massive infinite fortune into your empty account. He does not just clear your debt, he makes you legally wealthy.
That is imputation.
His perfect record of withstanding all that pressure is legally credited to the believer. If he had yielded to sin even once, he would have been disqualified. He would have had his own debt to pay.
Because we possess this specific kind of priest one, who completely understands the pressure, but completely defeated the sin, our entire posture before God radically shifts.
It has to.
We move from hiding among the trees in Eden to approaching the throne of the universe. Verse 16 opens with this monumental command. Let us therefore draw near with confidence to the throne of grace.
That is such an invitation.
The word confidence translates the Greek word parasia. This is not a religious term originally. It denotes the political freedom of speech enjoyed by citizens of a free state.
Oh, wow.
In the ancient world, approaching a monarch without permission was often a capital offense. But parasia means having the legal right to speak openly, frankly, and honestly without fear of retribution.
That is incredible.
By the blood of Jesus, the believer gains the legal right to speak their mind before the Lord of glory.
But notice the immense theological tension here. The destination you are approaching is a throne.
Yes.
A throne is a seat of absolute non-negotiable sovereignty. It is a place of judicial authority where the king dictates the law. If you walk into a throne room, you are walking into a dictatorship. Yet, this specific throne is designated as a throne of grace. Sovereignty is administering unmerited favor.
This fulfills the Old Testament mercy seat, the capare. That was the lid of the Ark of the Covenant.
Okay.
The Ark contained the tablets of the law which constantly condemned the people. But once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the high priest sprinkled blood on the capare to satisfy divine justice.
I see the connection.
The blood turns the judgment seat into a grace seat. Sovereignty does not terrify the believer in Christ. Rather, sovereign majesty ensures that the grace dispensed from that throne has the omnipotent backing of the King of the universe.
But practically speaking, how does a person do this? How can you come to God with shaking hands, filled with anxiety, acutely aware of your own failures this very morning, and still be coming boldly or with confidence?
It is a struggle for many.
Are we supposed to just fake it until we make it?
The tension is resolved when we understand what biblical boldness actually is. Boldness is not casual familiarity. It is not walking into the presence of God with arrogance, acting as if you are entitled to be there by your own nature.
Right, that would be foolish.
Nor is it a manufactured emotional hype where you try to work up a feeling of courage before you pray. It is a wholly objective confidence grounded entirely in the finished work of the mediator, not in our subjective feelings.
That is so freeing.
You can approach the throne with hands shaking from fear, with a voice trembling from grief, and still approach with absolute parasia.
Yeah.
Because your right to be there is secured by the blood of Christ, not by the stability of your emotions.
So, if the blood of Christ guarantees this incredible direct access to the sovereign ruler of the universe, why do humans constantly try to invent alternative ways to reach God?
It is our default setting, sadly.
The source material takes a sledgehammer to what is called sacerdotalism. That is a heavy theological word, but it simply means any system that says you need an earthly priest, a saint, or a specific ritual to act as a middleman between you and God. Think about how completely Hebrews 4 dismantles that idea. That system insists you need an earthly priest to absolve you, or that the sacrifice of the Mass must be continually offered, or that you need Mary as a co-mediatrix to soften up the Son so he will listen to you.
Right.
This text says absolutely not. The Son is already entirely sympathetic, and his sacrifice is finished once and for all.
The text also refutes the anti-Trinitarian cults, like Mormonism or the Jehovah's Witnesses, who deny Christ's dual nature.
Oh, that is a great point.
If he is not truly God and truly man in one person, he cannot bridge the gap. A mere human cannot satisfy infinite justice, and a pure spirit cannot shed blood or sympathize with human frailty.
Wow.
Furthermore, we see this text crushing modern, seeker-sensitive pragmatism. This is the mindset that thinks you need concert lighting, marketing techniques, and a coffee shop atmosphere to make God approachable.
Yeah, that is everywhere.
It completely ignores his objective holiness. The only thing that makes the holy God approachable is the blood of the perfect high priest.
But let's bring this down to the most common pastoral issue. What about the rampant issue of simple prayerlessness?
It is a massive problem.
We all do this, right? We go days without praying. We look at this VIP access to the creator of the universe, this blood-bought right of free speech at the throne, and we essentially say, no thanks, I will handle this Tuesday on my own.
The author's argument exposes that kind of prayerlessness as a form of functional atheism.
Ouch. That is strong.
It is true, though. To neglect prayer is to operate as though we have no advocate in heaven, and as though our own resources are entirely sufficient to manage our lives.
Wow.
To refuse to approach the throne is a declaration that we prefer self-reliance over divine grace. It is an insult to the finished work of the priest who purchased that access with his own blood.
Yeah.
The text uses the plural, let us draw near, which highlights the corporate nature of this command. Congregations are meant to gather and direct their collective weakness toward Christ.
The modern church often substitutes this corporate dependency with therapeutic self-help, where the goal is just to manage our trauma or build self-esteem.
It is very prevalent today.
But the scriptural mandate is to bring our absolute bankruptcy to the mediator. A healthy church does not pretend its members have no struggles. It actively points struggling people to the only sanctuary where true strength is found.
Yes.
And this dynamic of a sovereign, loving mediator reflects the complementarian order established for the home and the church, doesn't it?
Yes, it provides the perfect model. Just as Christ exercises his headship not through detached tyranny, but through loving, self-sacrificing representation and sympathetic care.
Right.
Human leadership within the covenant community is called to mirror that pattern of sacrificial headship. Husbands and church elders are to direct those under their care toward the ultimate provision of the throne of grace. They lead by laying down their lives, just as the high priest did.
So when we finally drop the self-reliance, when we bring our raw, honest, unfiltered weakness to this throne, what are we promised in return?
The text is very clear on this.
Verse 16 concludes by saying, we draw near that we may receive mercy and find grace for help in time of need. The Greek phrase for that last part is eukairon bothian.
Yes.
It means help suited to the proper season or well-timed help. It is vital to distinguish between what we are receiving here. Mercy is what pardons our daily guilt and addresses the misery of our failures.
Right.
Grace is what empowers us, giving us undeserved strength to endure the trials we are facing. But that phrase, is euparon bothian, puts the timing squarely in God's wisdom, not our preferred schedule.
That is a critical distinction. We live in an era of instant gratification. We want the pain gone yesterday.
Absolutely.
But God might not remove the thorn in your flesh right away.
No.
He might not cure the disease or fix the broken relationship on your timeline.
Yeah.
Sometimes grace does not look like an immediate escape hatch.
Yeah.
Grace looks like the supernatural strength to withstand the trial without being crushed by it. The assistance is fitted precisely to the distress, and the timing is determined by the one who sees the end from the beginning.
If you are listening right now and feeling like God is late or that your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling, how does this specific Greek phrase redefine your weight?
It changes your whole perspective.
It tells you that the help is calibrated to the perfect season. The delay is not a denial, it is a preparation for a timely deliverance.
This raises an issue regarding how we interpret our suffering as believers.
Elon.
It is a severe temptation to measure divine faithfulness by the metric of our immediate physical or emotional comfort.
We all fall into that trap.
When the relief does not come quickly, the enemy whispers that the throne is empty or that the high priest has turned his face away. But the promise of Isu Karen Boethian anchors our expectations in the wisdom of God. The throne is never barren. The promised aid is never tardy. Sometimes the mercy we receive comes in the form of a sharp rebuke that corrects our course.
Wow.
Sometimes the grace comes as a closed door that prevents us from ruining our lives. Sometimes it is the quiet endurance to wake up and face another day of chronic pain while still trusting the Lord.
That is so hard to do, but so true.
We must not interpret a continued trial as divine neglect. Rather, the trial is the very setting in which the priestly intercession of Christ proves its absolute sufficiency. We come to the throne because we are needy, and we leave the throne supplied according to the unsearchable wisdom of a king who loves us enough to give us what we actually need exactly when we need it, rather than what our flesh demands in the moment.
Synthesizing the core movement of our deep dive today. We started in a terrifying place, standing naked and exposed under the razor-sharp sword of God's word, our guilt completely undeniable.
Right.
But instead of leaving us there to perish, the text moved us toward a compassionate, sinless high priest who understands the full weight of our humanity.
Right.
He withstood the maximum pressure of temptation without breaking, crediting his perfect righteousness to us. And the text ended by bringing us right up to the throne of the universe, a place where sovereign justice has been totally satisfied by blood, leaving only a fountain of mercy and grace for the believer to approach with absolute confidence.
The source material issues a stark warning and a plea based on this reality.
What is that plea?
If you are listening to this and you have never trusted in this mediator, the text makes it clear that without Christ, that throne remains a place of unmitigated, terrifying judgment.
Yeah, that exposure from verse 13.
Exactly. You cannot survive that exposure on your own merits. The law will lay you open. Forsake your self-righteousness, drop the religious games, and flee to the mediator today.
And for the believer, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as we close.
Okay.
Think about the physical ascension of Christ. He did not shed his humanity when he went back to heaven. He has an ongoing bodily existence right now at the right hand of the Father.
Yes.
And on that glorified body, the physical scars of the crucifixion remain. What does it mean for your daily mundane struggles, your physical pain, your emotional exhaustion? That eternity itself forever bears the physical marks of his sympathy for you.